for this year's 2020 Black Philanthropy Month Lunch and Learn webinar series. This event is presented by Black Funders of St. Louis. We are a local giving circle. Our members are Black people from all walks of life who agree to make an annual contribution of $300 or more, which is pulled together, collectively pulling our resources, which donations from non-members to award grants to Black-led nonprofits in the St. Louis area each year. Since 2017, we have awarded more than $10,000 to local organizations. In addition, we encourage to offer our time and our talent, in addition to awarding grants to support Black-led nonprofit organizations in our community. Our work is rooted in the pursuit of racial equity and a fairer St. Louis. To learn more about us or our grant making, our giving circles, and the webinar series, please be sure to visit our website at www.blackfundersstl.com. I'd also like to acknowledge our fiscal sponsor, the Deaconess Foundation, which is providing technical assistance for the Black Philanthropy Month webinar series. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we officially begin. Please be sure to use the Q&A box to pose questions to our panelists. So should you have any questions, we will be monitoring this, so please feel free to pose questions using the Q&A box. Also note that this event is being broadcast live on the Deaconess Foundation's YouTube channel. It will be available on our website in the coming week, top of next week, no later than the end of next week. So you will also be able to view this website in addition to other webinars that we have recorded from this 2020 Black Philanthropy Month at your leisure. So please feel free to share with both your personal and your professional network. So today's session is the power of giving. Today, we will be discussing the history of charitable giving in the Black community and the power of investing in our institutions. We're joined today by no other than Miss Valita Fulwood, is a founding member of the Charlotte's New Generation of African-American Philanthropists. She's the author of the award-winning book, Giving Back, a tribute to generations of African-American philanthropists, and creator of the Soul of Philanthropy multimedia exhibit. Ms. Erica Barclay is a consultant and a founder of Fresh Philanthropy. She is the author of The Value of Giving Circles in the Evolution of Community Philanthropy, which was presented in 2012, and a frequent media contributor on the topics of giving circles and Black philanthropy. Erica is a co-chair of the Southside Giving. I'm sorry?
It's Akira.
Akira, I'm sorry, Akira, I apologize. Thank you, Akira, for correcting me. Akira is the co-chair of the Southside Giving Circle of the Chicago Foundation for Women. She earned a master's degree in fundraising and grant making from New York University and a Bachelor of Social Work from Virginia Commonwealth University. Akira Barclay.
Yeah.
Tracy Webb is the founder of Black Benefactors, a giving circle based in Washington, D.C. that provides funding and in-kind support to Black-led nonprofit organizations. Webb has been hailed as the first online chronicler of Black philanthropy as the creator of BlackGivesBack.com, a pioneering blog that highlighted stories of Black giving from 2017 to 2015. She also serves as the architect for Black Philanthropy Month that is observed every August. Next up, we have Ms. Allison T. Mcneil. Ms. Allison T. Mcneil is a nationally recognized award-winning strategic thinker and creative entrepreneur with nearly 20 years of experience in performing arts and education. With technical expertise in nonprofit management, grant making, assessment, and program evaluation, Allison has led multi-million-dollar change efforts that have directly informed policy, grant making, and strategic partnerships. Her efforts have also fortified leadership and secured grants that expand equity and access for women, emerging leaders, and communities of color. Next up, we have Ms. Sierra Coleman. Sierra Coleman is the founder of the Purposeful Project, which aims to inspire, cultivate, and activate the spirit of giving amongst Black, aspiring philanthropists, and social change agents. As a philanthropic professional with over 8 years of experience, she is dedicated to disrupting philanthropy from within and advocating for Black communities. She is currently a program manager for the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, working in the foundation's priority place of New Orleans, Louisiana. Additionally, she leads the Louisiana chapter of Emergency Practitioners in Philanthropy, also known as EPIP, and is the co-chair of the Health Action Table through the Greater New Orleans Funders Network. She was a 2018 Places Fellow through the Funders Network for Smart Growth and Livable Communities, and was a member of the 2019 Emerging Practitioners of Philanthropy Giving Circle. Sierra holds a Master of Public Administration degree with a nonprofit leadership emphasis from Western Michigan University, and obtained a Bachelor's of Science from Alabama Agriculture and Mechanical University. Miranda Richardson, is CEO and principal of MWR Coaching and Consulting. She brings years of experience in both advancing racial equity through social services, government, and philanthropic institutions. She holds a Master's of Public Policy and Concentration, Nonprofit Management and Leadership, and a Bachelor's of Science in Healthcare Administration and Planning. Ms. Richardson completed an approved International Coaching Federation certification from Coach Diversity in Washington, DC, and is now coaching individuals to help unlock, elevate, and embrace their gifts to create their own realities. As CEO and principal of MWR Coaching and Consulting, Mrs. Richardson focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion, community engagement, capacity building and assessments, cannabis education and advocacy, and transformative coaching. In addition to her commitment with MWR Coaching and Consulting, Ms. Richardson is the founder and president of Black Funders of St. Louis, a local giving circle that is committed to the elevation and transformation of Black communities in St. Louis. So, without further ado, welcome to our esteemed panelists, and thank you for being a part of today's conversation that is focused on the power of giving. So how's everybody doing this morning?
Pretty good.
Great.
Good.
I would say that's a loaded question, but you know, hanging in there.
Sorry, didn't mean to present any loaded questions.
No, so much going on.
Especially on a Saturday. So let's go ahead and get started, ladies. If you're all right, we can just jump right in, popcorn style, this conversation. I think what we have today is some really important dialogue as we talk about giving, and more so giving from the standpoint of Black philanthropists and even in our communities, and what does it mean to pull our resources to then give back to support our own and our communities. And so if we could get started, what would you define, or how would you define a giving circle? And talk about why do you feel like this is needed, Black ones or Black-led giving circles?
Well, I'll jump in. It's related. One, I want to thank you and Black Funders of St. Louis for even pulling us together and hosting this conversation. I really appreciate it and think it's much needed, and we should do this more often. And I'm part of New Generation of African-American Philanthropists, a giving circle in Charlotte, North Carolina. We just celebrated our 14th year. And I define giving circles as, akin to book clubs, in the sense that they can take on the own flavor and dynamics of the people involved. And they can look very differently from city to city, group to group. And so I think that's always important to present to people, particularly Black giving circles, because the idea of our work being self-determined is really key. And so from what we choose to name ourselves to how we choose to organize, I think it's really important that we hold that power, and is part of the glue that keeps giving circles intact. And one of the reasons my circle has been around for 14 years, even the added challenges of being a Black giving circle around just trusting each other, around economic insecurity, around the wealth gap, all these factors would pull us apart in theory. But I think our heritage, our legacy, our traditions that bring us together, in fact, force us together in other ways, is part of the power of Black giving circles.
I want to echo what Valeda said. I know you didn't mention this, but with our work, I'm Allison. I co-founded the Maynard Biggers Artists Fund. It is a giving circle made up of Hampton University alumni. All of us went to Hampton University. So to Valeda's point about some sort of commonality of interest, all of the members of our giving circle went to Hampton University. We all believed that art, specifically art that raised awareness about social justice, was meaningful and needed to be funded in a way that we could directly describe for based on what we knew. Many of the people in our giving circle were not just Hampton alumni. They were artists, they were arts administrators, they were community organizers. And because of that, we were familiar with what it looked like to try and get funding in the traditional grant making system. So we came together as a group to try and set what we thought were the correct parameters to fund our work, to connect to people that were actually doing the type of work that we didn't necessarily see getting funded. And then to decide how might we do this work together. And to Valeta's other point, we did that work, but we also got together for social activities too, because we had so many different, our values were aligned in many different ways. So our planning to actually make the funds was one part of what it meant to be a part of our giving circle. And so and another part to just name, I said our name was the Maynard Biggers Artist Fund. Our fund and circle is named after Dorothy Maynard and John Biggers. Both of them were Hampton University students. Dorothy Maynard being a student, and also she founded Harlem School for the Arts, and she was the first Black woman on the board of the Met. So her life was an example of what it meant to use your art to raise awareness about social ills in our communities and or create opportunities for those that usually were not. Same with John Biggers, who was a muralist and who traveled around Africa to do cultural exchange between the United States and Africa, and then became the first chair at Texas A&M in visual arts. So in our mind, we had Hampton in common. We had a desire to fund artists that were doing a specific type of art. And we wanted to, while not necessarily solely naming Hamptonians as our fund awardees, we wanted to name those who walked in the legacy that they created.
And I want to also echo some of the things that Allison said in terms of being united around values. So the Southside Giving Circle, we are a group of women who live on the South Side, work on the South Side. And so in our work, we are learning about funding and supporting Black women-led organizations that are in our own communities. And that's a key part of what brings us together. Understanding that overall in institutional philanthropy, that pool of charitable dollars that goes to women's organizations is dismally low, about 2%. You bring that down to women of color, Black women and girls, you're talking somewhere around a half of a percent. So the Southside Giving Circle, we call ourselves Queen Makers. We're really here to sort of disrupt that. And we're very explicit in our focus. We actually have a leadership award as well. In addition to supporting organizations, we support women who are in the leadership role of these organizations to help them with their professional development, to keep them strong so that they can continue to lead and make a change in their community.
Hi, folks. Sierra Coleman, the Purposeful Project located in New Orleans. And thank you, Miranda, for this opportunity to connect on this very important topic. So the Purposeful Project, though, is not a giving circle. Part of the reason why I founded this project is because I've been in philanthropy for over 8 years. And oftentimes I was the only Black person in rooms, the youngest Black person in rooms. And also when I started to have conversation with my friends about philanthropy and giving, most folks didn't see themselves as philanthropists. And so in terms of giving circles, I'll just say in its simplest terms, it's a collective of people who pool their resources to fund issues that they care about. And this is not a new concept for Black community. This is something that we've actually been doing all of our lives. And so Black giving circles are needed because capitalism and capitalistic structures And institutional philanthropy is not going to save us. And I want to hone in on philanthropy because that's the sector that I represent. But I think we are continuing to get inundated with this evidence that despite having a racial equity agenda, despite having Black leadership, that philanthropy has a really long way to go in terms of achieving equity and supporting this Black liberation movement, if you will. And so I know most of us have probably seen the National Council of Responsive Philanthropy's report around community foundations and their giving to Black communities. And we know that they also are not given at the rate that they should be given to Black communities. And the fact that that data point is only 1% of grants are going to Black communities. And so, you know, with community foundations being situated in community, especially those that are in cities like New Orleans, that is a majority city made up of people of color, then, you know, we just really have a long way to go, and Black giving circles can really help to fill those gaps where institutional philanthropy is where they're missing the mark.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know if I have anything additional to add. I mean, I think everyone shared about the, you know, the definition of a giving circle. And as Valeda said, it can look any way that you want it to. This time of year, I always reflect because I actually launched Black Benefactors twice. The first time I launched it was actually during the week that Hurricane Katrina struck. And I had everything planned. I had I had mapped out, you know, just some launch activities, and then everything came to a halt. So, and at the time, I was having a little bit of problems with my host. And so I left my host shortly after, and then I regrouped and relaunched Black Benefactors in 2007. So it's been a long road, but I'm really happy to be in company with my fellow Black Giving Circle. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today, and thank you again for hosting this.
Thank you all. I mean, I don't have anything to add. I feel like you all definitely took that definition and ran with it, and I don't want to mess it up. So you all did phenomenal. There were some things that came out of that conversation, like I heard alignment, values, institutional philanthropy not necessarily being a resource or go-to to support this work. And so Sierra and I both spent time in philanthropy for a short stint of time while I was still in. Sierra's obviously still in, and our paths crossed. And I just want to kind of go back to one of the points she made about, you know, the reports that are coming out, where the money's going, and Akira, you kind of hit on this too. And for me, when the vision came to me for Black Funders of St. Louis, I was still in philanthropy, and this is being recorded, so let me get myself together. I was ready to like scream because I just felt like, why are we not having these conversations? And so for me, not seeing where the money was not going was bothering me. There was a true sense of where I could see that where my values did not align with the institution I was currently employed with at that time. And so for me, it was like, well, what would it look like to have Black people collectively pour resources and we support one another? Because I think to the point that was made, I think Sierra made it, that no one is coming to save us. Like, we have to be in position, and how do we get ourselves into position to be able to move forward in our work? And so when I think about how we started Black Funders of St. Louis, it was in some ways birthed out a lack thereof. And one of the founding members quickly shifted that from a lack thereof to asset building. And so recognizing that although this does not exist, I think that we can move forward in this lane from an asset building standpoint, because I think that society labels Black people everything but what we would label ourselves. Like, we don't consider ourselves to be disadvantaged or at risk, like all these terms that they put on us. And so we have assets that exist that will expound upon what is going on in our community to bring strength and transformation. And so quickly shifting from a lack thereof to asset building really gave a different perspective in terms of how I approach the work moving forward. And so my question to you is, like, when you think about, I know, like, believe you got to go back 14 years, and Tracy, you have to go back a while in terms of when you all started. Like, but when you think about your giving circle, what was the driving force for your reason to, as to why you started your giving circle? And this is a question for everyone.
First. Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm a little under the weather today. So my driving force was that I was a nonprofit director in a suburb of DC, and we were providing a critical service to the Black community. It was a primarily Black county in Maryland. And one day out of the blue, I received a call from a women's giving circle. They heard about the organization and they wanted to come out and possibly give us a grant. And that was the first time I'd even heard of a giving circle. And so when they came out, I had more questions for them because I was intrigued. Like, you know, who are you and what do you do? And like, how does all of this work? So I had a lot of challenges as a Black nonprofit director with fundraising, with board development, just building capacity. And so I could not keep the doors open. I tried very hard, just did not have the resources. And so when we closed, I vowed to myself, like, I felt like I had to do something because I felt the community because it was such a needed program and organization. I was fortunate enough to get a position in grant making soon after. And I looked at my portfolio and I thought, this is interesting. So the majority of the Black-led nonprofits led by communities of color, they were getting the micro grants. Like they were the organizations getting all of the capacity. And one of my coworkers who was not Black, she came into my office one day and she said, why is it this? Like, I don't understand. Can you explain this to me? And I said, I can't even explain it myself. So I thought back to the Giving Circle visit at my previous job. And I began to think, like, I wonder if there's a resource like this, in the DC area community that could support Black-led nonprofits. At the time, I could only find one, but I could not afford the joint amount. And it was a giving circle it was a women's giving circle. So I kept looking and I just couldn't find one at all. So I was looking to join a circle and not start one. And so I just decided to just fill the gap. And that's why I created Black Benefactors. I created it co-ed intentionally because the majority of giving circles at the time were women-led. There's nothing wrong with women giving circle. Let me put that out there. But I just wanted to fill the gap. So it was co-ed and it was at a joint amount that people could afford. So that's pretty much the impetus. And then supporting Black-led nonprofits. And I'm just really, proud, years later, still open. All volunteer run. We all have full-time jobs. I'm sure like all of us here, just keeping it going. Our grants are larger. Every year they get larger. We give out more money each year, which I'm really, really happy about. So that's like in a nutshell why I started Black Benefactors, and I'm just, looking forward to the future.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. I'll share a little bit because while it was 14 years ago, I still recall vividly the confluence of events that inspired me to help start a giving circle. So it was really two things at play. One, I'd been a part of a collective giving group in my community that was predominantly white. And while I worked as a consultant in the philanthropic realm and worked with a lot of nonprofits and national and local foundations, I really found being a part of that collective giving group, it was a year-long philanthropy leadership program. And we pooled our money and then went through a mini grant cycle. And that was kind of the program. And I thought it was really powerful, even though I had been a grant writer and reviewer and managed some projects for funders over time, actually having skin in the game and developing our own mission and organizing our own site visits and application review process was really powerful and enlightening to me. And so I'm like, wow, more people should have opportunities for this. So I joined the board of that program. And each year when I reached out to my friends to encourage them, it was always a tougher case with my Black friends. White people in the community would immediately get the value and contribute, but it was a deeper conversation with Black folks. So that struck me. And then at the same time, I was serving on the board of the African American Community Foundation here in Charlotte, which is a fund of our community foundation. And we had a visit from Daryl Lester, who I call the godfather of Black giving circles in the South. Daryl Lester and Ethan Lindsay visited and shared and talked about Black philanthropy. And it was the first time I'd ever heard that phrase. And as they expounded on it, it really resonated because I knew of those traditions, I knew of those ways, I knew of our heritage around giving that wasn't reflected in conventional philanthropy and in philanthropic institutions. So it was really, really powerful to me. And then they talked about some of the Black giving circles they were helping to form across the South. So I'm like, wow, like I've struggled to bring Black friends to this collective giving group, but you're creating entirely Black giving circles. Like I want to be a part of that. So I was really energized and, you know, worked with some of my colleagues with the African American Community Foundation to seed the start of what would become New Generation of African American Philanthropists. So that's our origin story.
Thank you.
I guess I mentioned earlier that when we started, me and our co-founder, Nefertari Kirkman Bay Pross, both Hamptonians, both working in the arts in very different ways. Neff worked within arts organizations. I had previously worked at arts organizations, but I'm a full-time entrepreneur that is a consultant to both grant makers in the arts and artists and arts organizations. And so in some way, across both of us, we both saw what philanthropic giving looked like at the institutional level for artists, and specifically artists that we were interested in funding, Black people and people that were raising awareness about what was happening in our communities, Black joy, Black resistance, all of that. And we, you know, kind of talked about the idea for about a year, like, wouldn't it be nice? Like, and, you know, and I'm working as a consultant to grant makers, helping them think about how to think broader in their giving and where in their policies and practices create barriers. And then we thought, like, why are we trying to help them figure it out? I mean, we can continue to do that, but we can also invest in our own, and we can also do it in a way that feels natural for us. And so when we got together, it was always a big brunch. Everybody bought some food, like we're sitting around watching things on TV, singing, listening to music. We're also Hamptonian, so we also have that intergenerational connection, because at Hampton, we each have class names. And so our Giving Circle members were from like class of 78 all the way through class of 2003. And we each had the desire to be more responsive in a way that didn't feel like we were just over here on the side doing something that, didn't make any real sense. And all of us had wanted to be a part of the change that we wanted to see, but we weren't sure how to get it started and where to get started or who to talk. And I literally reached out to Tracy and Valeda and was like, hey, I know y'all have been doing this. I mean, I knew what it was to be a grant maker because I've done that too. But like giving circles by design are very different. So we were never ones to just start from scratch. We wanted to kind of investigate, what does it mean to do this work? What are the options that we have available to us? How do we choose a right sponsor so that we can work with them and the money and the administrative fees that they take from the donations aren't too much from the donations that are given? There were so many discussions that we made as a group. So even having the time to think about it as a group was like life-changing for us. It gave us a sense of empowerment. And this was not us being of service. This was like a collective economic empowerment goal. So all of us in some way, shape or form, we started with like nominations, then we went to applications because we wanted to kind of expand what it meant to do this work effectively. And it's been a ride, I'll say that. And I'm so grateful for Tracy and Valeda's guidance, because I've definitely called them more than once for our 5 years in existence. And I think that is the power of giving circles too, right? Like that we can reach out to each other. They can be responsive. We can share opportunities across giving circles, because if we're about Black empowerment, why not start with us and be for us? So.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I agree. I welcome that. Anyone else want to weigh in on the giving circles? And I do want to add that as I play it back in 2016, when I was doing all this research, I had a conversation with you, Allison, I had a conversation with Tracy and Edward, both from Black benefactors. And then also you, Valeda, we talked about the soul of philanthropy as well as giving circles. And you're absolutely right, Allison. It's nice to be able to have those resources to pull from in terms of being able to get things started. Because to your point, if we're about Black empowerment, we should be supporting each other in these spaces. And the points that were made earlier about giving circles, like there are all kind of giving circles. But the idea of us having a Black-led giving circle and being intentional about supporting Black people in those spaces is something I feel that sets this space apart. And I'm being told to check Q&A. So a question that came up, how can low socioeconomic areas orchestrate giving circles with limited business activity? And so I think this question is being posed to the overall group.
I actually can jump in and answer that because that is my stepmom, my bonus mama.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Ms. Sierra.
Who is tuning in? And this also connects back to the question that you just asked. And I think that one thing that really needs to happen when it comes to philanthropy is really shifting the narrative, right? So like I mentioned, a lot of Black folks, at least in my network, don't see themselves as philanthropists. And so there's a lot of work to be done in that space, really around shifting that narrative. And I think part of the reason why is because when you think about traditional philanthropy, you think about a white, rich, wealthy man giving away millions of dollars. And so we know what wealth looks like. We know what the wealth inequality gap looks like between white folks and Black folks. And so sometimes I think people get discouraged about like, oh, is my giving, however large or small that is going to make is that really going to make an impact? And so part of the reason why I want to start a giving circle here in New Orleans, and we are in conversation with some young professionals about starting a giving circle that really focuses on emerging philanthropists, is to really start to shift that narrative and also broaden the definition about what it means to be a philanthropist. Time, talent, and treasure. Yes, we definitely want financial resources, but we all have gifts and talents that we can bring to bear that can benefit our communities. So in terms of the question that Gail posed, I think that it's thinking more broadly around what it means to give, what philanthropy means in terms of Black philanthropy, and just going beyond the financial resources, but also tapping into, as you mentioned, Miranda, our assets, our gifts, and our talents to support the communities that we live in and we serve.
I want to piggyback on what Sarah and Tracy said, because I think I heard Tracy mention, I can't afford joining one of the larger giving circles. That was another part about MBAF, which is what we call ours for short. We didn't want to have a $1,000 entry point because one of the things we wanted to do was create the space for people to actually join. So we had like $250 as a way that you could start. But what we also did, in addition to giving awards to certain people, we also, now they were part of the Hampton Network. And if you know anything about HBCUs and all of the things, it's all about passing the network. And so now you don't just get a grant. If things come across our desk that are aligned with any of the artists that have come through our application or nomination system, we pass it to people. Artists and nominees have gotten, awardees and nominees have gotten hired through people in the network. So it becomes more than just that one grant. Time is spent, to Sierra's point, time is spent in communities with the artists, because we're not investing in arts organizations. It's literally an artist. When they tell us with how they're using their money, they're using it to pay rent. And what we know about artists, you know, and even the evaluation grant application process, grant writing may not be the thing that they are doing. They're artists. So it's like, can we provide grant writing support? Can we offer money to, or connections to HR professionals? So it becomes way more than just the individual fund award that we make. It goes, and it's just a powerful opportunity to just be in family, in familiarity with each other.
And I want to emphasize, just in terms of giving circles, that the collective nature of giving this way addresses the amounts. As someone who is in philanthropy, I do push back very hard about this idea that philanthropy is multi-million dollars and billion dollars. Most philanthropists are just not billionaires. They're just not. So I say that a lot because we don't hear it enough. And then that contributes to this, phenomenon that Sierra's talking about, where people don't identify as philanthropists, as givers. My giving circle, the 7 founders, they didn't feel that way either. That's why we call ourselves Queen Makers, because we are dedicated to supporting these Black women and girls in our communities. So I really want to emphasize and sort of reiterate what Valeda said earlier in terms of giving circles being what you want it to be. Giving circles are wildly diverse because they come up from communities and they're built around meeting specific needs, that those members have identified. So across the country, we are all engaged in work that we've identified that is vitally important in our communities. And for a Southside Giving Circle, we really focus on organizations with budgets under $500,000. That way, our contributions are significant, and in a way where these are the kinds of organizations that sort of fly under the radar of institutions. So you may have never even heard of this organization until the Queen Makers came around, and we're going to tell everybody about them.
Mm-hmm. That's so awesome.
It is. And I think too, Akira, to that same point that you were making about the diversity within giving circles, there are so many different ways to set a giving circle up. I remember when we were first doing research, and you all kind of touched on this already. I mean, everybody had from $1,000 a year to, I believe, Allison, I think you all were like $1 a day that equated to $365 or something like that. $365.
You could do monthly payments. You could split up your payments.
Yeah. Yeah, and so thank you for that clarification. Giving circles have various structures. Like for example, we offer split payments, so it's $300 annually. But however, if you don't have the $300, you can do split payments. That's something that we can work out internally that won't, we don't have a whole lot of capacity, but we can offer split payment options. And so to that question around like low socioeconomic areas, you can set a range that you feel is appropriate for the audience that you are looking to attract. So we have a wide span. And some people will say, well, $300 is too much, Miranda. And I will say it probably is for some people, but we just felt like that was a reasonable round number that we could work from. And so when we're in conversation with people, I haven't had people say that's too much money. That's just too much money. Now, younger college students who may want to engage, who may not necessarily have that extra $300, there are different ways that you can plug into the work, because I think that what's most important is to highlight is the time, talent, and treasure. So although you may not have the money, you have time and you have a talent that can support the work. And people say, well, I don't know if I have a talent. You do. You have a talent that can support and advance the work. And this work requires a lot of people. So it's a lot of work. So 5-10 people can't carry the work. We need more people to get engaged and to get involved and to figure out their path and how they can support the work. And so figure out what that looks like for you and your tribe, but there's definitely ways to plug into the giving circle and to the work overall.
Yeah, I also wanted to just chime in on one of our experiences in forming NGAP Charlotte, is that when we were forming, it was a lengthy series of conversations about what our threshold for membership would be. And so it was everything from everybody should pay $3,000 to everybody should just give whatever they can. And we arrived at $365 for our circle, as well as I know that's the case for many other circles, and $1 a day. So it's really hard to make a case against being able to commit $1 a day. And we had it set up where members can pay in increments, some as little as $30 a month or even $10 a month. Some people pay lump sum. And of course, if you can give more than $365 in a year, then folks do, or there's an invitation to do that as well. And we got a lot of pushback from some folks from, what's $365 gonna do? Or, if you have 20 people or 40 Black people come together, That's less than $10,000, or, what are you going to do with that? And we were able to just kind of keep naysayers at bay and just keep on keeping on. And part of the good feedback and advice we got from people like Daryl Lester and other giving circles is, don't let that stop you. It really isn't about the money.
Right.
I think the ways we do when we come together, our power in coming together is like a superpower. I mean, it's amazing. I've seen it over the last 14 years in terms of our small dollars coming together, and just the power that we come together ignites so much more. I mean, people get passionate and contribute and want to support us. Non-Black people want to contribute to our work, sometimes institutional philanthropy, sometimes family members want to contribute to it. And so it really creates a amazing ripple effect that you can't even anticipate. You just have to trust going in, that allows your circle to do so much more than just be limited to the dollars. And I think that's one of the false ideas too many of us fall into around philanthropy, that it is all about the money. And I know with the soul of philanthropy, I often say, philanthropy is deeper than your pockets. So for people who get fixated on what your net wealth is and things like that, miss the point. And I think this is a story that Black giving circles have to offer to the world, and can lift up our successes and our power and our impact, that isn't about the amount, how many zeros are behind that dollar sign in a check.
I wanted to piggyback really quickly on that point in saying that MBAF, through the brainchild of Neff, my co-founder, has begun hosting reception during Hampton's homecoming every year, where in some cases our awardees have come and shared their art with us, but it's just literally a time to come together. And what we've been able to do is get current students involved in either serving as the band. Someone was there one year as the person, like a journalism student was using the time to interview us, to talk about why we were doing it. So it literally goes so much further than just the money that we give to people. And while it is really exciting to hear some of our awardees say, this was my first grant, and because I got this grant, now another organization has funded me. That's just a part of the pipeline, right? Like, it is intentional that we're doing this together, that we're feeding into that current students, even though this is not affiliated with Hampton University at all. Our members are all around the country. But what we're intending to do is enter in the space in various ways: collective giving, mentorship, resource sharing, all of that. It's really beautiful to see. And definitely when you think about, as an evaluator, that's what I do in my in my professional life, quantifiable and qualitative metrics to determine, like, all of that. If we needed to do that, we could, but like Black people, the spirit of the way we move, it just naturally unfolds. So I think that I just want to name that, because a lot of time in grant making, you get caught up in the metrics and the outcomes and all of the things. And what I often say, specifically to our communities, like African dance, people trying to figure out, well, how do you measure healing? How do you know? It's the thing that you just know. So how do we start to tell those stories? Because what we do in Black giving circles is so much bigger than just giving money.
And can I also just say really quickly that I think Black giving is really underestimated. I just saw yesterday that the Young Black and Giving Back Institute raised over $250,000 in a day that went to support Black-led organizations. On social media, I saw that Jackson State University in Mississippi raised like over $400,000 on their day of giving to support the university. So we have these proofs of evidence that our giving is powerful. And I think that it just goes underestimated sometimes. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think too, because we have a couple of questions, but they segue well into what we're talking about now. And so if it's all right, I can read the couple of questions and then I can pose this question because I think that what your responses will answer these questions. So the two questions that we have right now from our attendees, one, I started a $2,500 micro grant fund for Black women creatives last year. It started as a giving circle with the intention of all the Black women in my network to contribute. Prior to the pandemic, I had been thinking of how to encourage all of my one-time donors to continue as monthly or quarterly donors. At this critical time, I don't even know how to engage them in that way. Any tips? Second question, what projects have proven to be successful that make individuals want to chime into a giving circle? I am a community activist, but support is limited to the faithful few. Need ideas to capture all. And so the question, I think a good question to help with these responses to these questions is, what do you feel will motivate Black donors, or what is a motivation for Black donors? And keeping in mind, when we talk about donors, we are talking about it from a financial standpoint, but also people who are willing to give their time and their talent, because what we also find is that time and talent often translates to higher return than sometimes the funds that people can award when you do the breakdown of time and talent in terms of being able to capture the overall impact.
Well, I know Sahat, who asked the first question. Sahat Walker runs the Ashi Fund in Washington, D.C. It's an amazing collective, like she said, meant to support and invest in Black creatives. And I think for her, having been one of the reviewers for that, it is the nature, she doesn't only just give the awards, right? Like she also brings the people that donate together for activities that just help us feel nurtured and help us feel fulfilled, like arts and crafts, or times to reflect on your experiences, or creating spotlights and highlights of the artists in the space. So for that, I think it's a familiarity with your cause and your value, relationship with your community. Many of the people that I know that are connected to what Sahat, and that's the woman that asked the first question, does, is because they really believe in what she's doing, and she's already demonstrated through her past activities her commitment to this work. So it's like, if Sahat is doing it, I'm there. Or the activities that she programs as related to the Ashi Fund, you just want to go because it's something that feeds into you. So I would say, and the same thing happens with us. People that donate to MBAF, they donate because they are already connected to someone that's already in the circle. Right. They believe in the power of art to be transformative in lives and want to donate however they can. And for us, you can be a member or you can be a donor. You don't have to be a member and donate $250 and serve on a committee and vote and all that. You can just donate on your own on our website. You can send in an in-kind donation. There's so many ways to think about what it means to show up and be supportive. And so in some cases, we thought about, well, what do we actually need? We started to outline what we actually needed. Free space sometimes. I think we've gotten wine, radio spotlight. So those are ways that people can donate. And then by offering those monthly options, monthly options for payment and activities throughout the year, it definitely helped people feel connected and wanting to invest. So yay, Sahat, keep going. I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I probably want to just share that that I know with our circle and our journey, it took about 18 months for us to work through all of our stuff to really agree, yeah, this is it, and begin writing checks. And at that point, we were entering the recession that hit in 2008. And one of the things I learned is not to, this addresses several questions that have come up in discussions, but, not to prejudge who you think will give and how they can give at a time, even during times of hardship. So one of the things I just learned so many lessons, and not to have judgment and just move on. And if people value what you value, they connect with you and move with you. And so over the 18 months that our circle was forming, and we just had these monthly gatherings, and different people would kind of come in and out and help shape the direction of the work. there were people that, I mean, I was struck by this. There were people who were part of that process. I mean, time is valuable, as we all know. People who came monthly to all those meetings and contributed to the input. But when it came time to write a check, for whatever reason, they didn't. And I don't know all the factors that played into that. One of the things that I do stress, while, you know, we've made a point in saying that money's not everything, but money is something. And for us, it is a non-negotiable. You have to contribute to the circle financially to be a part of it. We are flexible and understanding. You can make small payments. You can, you know, defer your payment. We don't police it, but there is an expectation that you give financially, and we don't let people off the hook. Too many times, I think, as Black people, we let other Black people linger in the time and talent space and don't nudge them to step up into the treasure space. And that is really important as well. And so anyway, I was just struck, the people who, even during a really tough time when folks were being laid off left and right, particularly in a banking town like Charlotte, that the people who still contributed, you couldn't have anticipated it. It wasn't necessarily the corporate executive who still had their job. You know, sometimes it was an educator or people in more insecure spaces that still made the sacrifice and contributed to the circle. So at that point, I knew, you know, not to judge or anticipate who will contribute. And I've seen even now with the coronavirus and, again, economic insecurity that exists and health insecurity and all kinds of insecurity that exists in our communities right now, that members have stepped up bigger and stronger than ever this year, which I'm like, wow. And then even, I have to share this story. This week, we made our grant decisions and announced our grants yesterday for Giving Black Day, or for here in Charlotte, we call CLT Gives Black. And we had allocated $10,000 at the beginning of the year based on our fund of what we'd award in grants. And then, you know, the whole world turns upside down. And lo and behold, we ended up with $5,000 more than we anticipated. So while we had requested grants at up to $10,000 this year, and those were the requests, we really had $15,000 to give. And so on our call this week, and we're working through the decision-making process and looking at the finalists, the top 4. And when we narrowed it to the top 2 that we knew we wanted to fund, like, so how do we break down the funds? And we don't vote. I'm like, I guess maybe in my right brain way, like I personally, and this is part of the flavors of different giving circles, we don't have committees. I don't like the word committee. Everybody knows I'm like, call them tribes, teams, whatever you have to call them, but don't say committee around me. And not everybody feels that way. Again, with a lot of bankers and people from other professions and realms in the mix, that doesn't always go over well, but you know, we work it out. And we don't vote. We just work through consensus. So we ended up with possibly giving one 10,000 and one 5,000, or vice versa. And then there was a contingent who thought, let's just split the difference and give each 7,500, which to me sounded like a perfect solution. So we talked it through, and you know, nobody, or there wasn't consensus around what was the right approach. And then a member stepped up and just started spontaneously pledging money or contributing money in the space, like, I'll give it that, let's close the gap. So with 15 members on the call, in a matter of 3 minutes, we closed a $5,000 gap with members just stepping up at every amount from $25 to $1,000 to raise $5,000 to be able to give 2 grants of $10,000 this year, which was double what we thought at the start of the year. So I just share that as an example of our Black superpower, and what our social capital and financial capital can bring about when we come together, and that even in really tough times, we step up. In fact, there is research data that says in philanthropy, when in recession, when overall giving goes down, Black folks give, our giving goes up. So it's counterintuitive for some folks, but makes perfect sense for us.
And I think that's a key thing to remember in terms, I know that at some point we were going to talk about the value of Black-led giving circles in particular. And so I think that it is really relevant here to point out that a lot of what we know about philanthropy statistically, what we hear about philanthropy and those trends don't hold true when you talk about Black donors.
Mhm.
So I think that as Black people, we're sort of overstudied and under engaged. So you have to take this information that you're being given with a grain of salt. Any Black person that's engaged in philanthropy will read that and immediately see that it doesn't reflect your own experiences. So as someone who spent a little time in academia, who's professionally in the space, Black-led giving circles in particular, as you'll see with Tracy and Black Benefactors and Valeda and NGAP, these giving circles that have stood the test of time, seen 2 recessions, and continue to support their communities in ways that giving circles that are not Black-led have sort of come and gone. It's a real illustration of the particular way that Black people give and how these giving circles are coming together and the dedication to them that doesn't sort of ebb and flow with just general trends. We had a similar situation with the Southside Giving Circle this year where in this time of crisis, we were right in the beginning of our membership drives. So, you know, we gave some flexibility in terms of membership amounts, but we also had a member who said she was fine financially and was willing to give more. And she actually, for Black Philanthropy Month, gave a challenge. And so if all the other members could give, she was going to match it. And so we're in the middle of that. And it's pretty incredible because we do sort of drive and inspire each other because we understand that in times of crisis, it's our grantees, the Black women and girls, that need the help even more. Mm-hmm. So it's like the work that we do during these difficult times becomes that much more important. And then when you want to talk about small amounts, don't minimize those. We have grantees that are very literally paying for people to eat, providing diapers, and just general things that people need to live from day to day. And so you should never discount the value of what can be accomplished with even a small amount of money and support. So I do want to emphasize that in terms of, I think that there are a number of things at play, including Black culture, that makes Black-led giving circles very special in that way.
I'm not gonna lie, I have been on many a call trying to chase people down for their member dues. Hey, you know us, whatever day, because the way our dues cycle works, we pay at the same time every year. And then if people reach out or we make it available to pay on different, you know, on the monthly. And so I have been one of the ones that's like, hey girl, where your dues at? Or, you know what? It's fine. Maybe there's another way, another need that emerges that can be met. And you don't I mean, it's fine. We've had members that have been with us from the beginning. We've had members that we've been around for 5 years. We've had members that have been there year 1, year 3, year 5, and have been donating or sending artists to us. There's so many ways of getting connected, and we never want to create an environment, because one of the reasons why we have it is to say that what we're doing matters, how we show up matters. And so if you can't be a member, which for us means voting on who we award and serving on one of our committees, that's fine. That's fine. You don't have to be a member to be involved. You can donate time, you can donate energy, resource connection. And so we never want people to walk away like, oh Lord, I didn't pay my dues, they're going to yell at me. But we do make the calls. I don't want to minimize this reality that we have to call people, follow up, and or work out plans or anything like that. That's a reality too. And another thing that is also a reality is this notion like, tag, I can't pay this year. Does that mean I'm out of the circle? Or does that mean I'm no longer connected? And we don't ever want, because again, we're Hamptonians, so we're gonna see you on the yard. Like, we don't want, that's not what we're about. So I think it's a level of compassion connected to the way that we came together and want to stay together, even as leadership changes. Because, you know, one of the things that were important for us that was, even though Neff and I came up with the idea, our original founding members contributed to how our criteria looked, what our values would be. And so as we moved through the process, other people managed our efforts. So it wasn't always us doing everything. And that was just as important too. So for those that want to get involved in other ways, they could do that too.
I wanted to go back to the question about, and hopefully I'm remembering the question correctly, but one thing that I do is I focus more on the member experience, more so than anything. I haven't recruited a member in years because the members that come into the circle are brought in by current members. So there's different ways that you can focus on that. You can survey your members, find out, you know, what they like about being in the circle. And that's pretty much what I focus on. I'm a member of another, it's not a giving circle, but it's like a donor club. And I'm not going to say the name, but I don't have a good experience with this donor club. And then one day I received an email saying, you know, hey, you know, we'd like our members to host like salons or, you know, host some events to recruit other members to become, you know, to join the club. And I refuse to do it. I'm like, if I'm not even having a good experience, so I'm not going to recruit other people. And they're going to look at me saying, well, Tracy, you brought me in. So I think focusing on the member experience is really important. And as you said, Allison, you know, getting them involved. In 2014, we launched the dinner series with, you know, bringing in philanthropists. And one thing that I do is the members, they moderate it. I don't do anything. Only thing I do is on the back end is I plan it, you know, pick the site and the menu and everything, but the members moderate it, the members drive it. So even though, you know, I may be known as the founder and the face, I definitely don't drive things. So I think focusing on the member experience and making sure your donors have a wonderful, rich experience is what's going to bring in more people, more members and donors.
I mean, the value of not having founder syndrome in this space is incredible because nobody gets everything right the first time. And so the evolution is just as important as the founding. And so that's been one of those things that we've, you know, spent a lot of time talking about. Well, when we started, this is what we were trying to do. Or like when we moved from nominations to applications, that was a big thing because as artists and arts administrators, we were like, we already know who the people are that aren't getting funded. But we thought that we were essentially acting as if people do in philanthropy. Like, we don't know everybody. So let's broaden it so that, you know, and so the evolution of what it means to create the ways in which you work is just as important, and being open to the idea that you don't have it right all the time, but you're doing the best you can.
I mean, it's largely about building and nurturing a community. I mean, I came into this giving circle after reading an article about our founders, met them in person and just felt so light and inspired. I knew immediately that I was going to join this group of women who were just so powerful and so positive and had so much to contribute. I mean, even now I'll get an email from our email group and I just think to myself, like, these women can rule the world. Like, there probably isn't anything in any area of expertise that one of the Queen Makers doesn't have. And I think that bringing all of us together.
As we wait for Akira to come back, I guess we lost her momentarily. I'll just. Pardon?
I was trying to see. I didn't know if it was my Wi-Fi because it just stopped. So I think we might have lost Akira.
Right. I'm sure she'll rejoin.
Okay, technical difficulties on her side. So yeah, we'll keep going and she can come back in with her response.
I just wanted to echo, you know, everything everybody has said, and we often say, or I often say, we're a giving circle and a forgiving circle, because life happens, and we've had members of our 14-year history of, founding members or early members who then life happens, whether it's kids going to college or a divorce or a relocation, that they step away from the circle and then, return again 2 years later or even 7 years later. So just to let you know, that happens and it's okay. And, it's just part of the community and that we have. And I think it's really important to nurture that. And again, one of the beauties of our group.
Thank you. I think Akira was like, she was segueing us early, and even like in her latter comment before she was disconnected, we want to talk about giving circles, and some questions, some really good questions are coming up about like how to get started, like what about this, what about that? And we've kind of hit on a lot of things, from like, Tracy, your point about the membership engagement. Don't underestimate that, because you're right. If people are not having a good experience, then they're not going to want to give. They're not going to want to recruit. They're not going to want to return. So like, that membership experience is really important. That consensus, whatever that looks like for the giving circle, is really important. So like, those policies or structures or whatever procedures you put in place to move forward, all those things like account for where your giving circle will be going moving forward. And so Akira kind of alluded to it. We're all giving circles, and so we're all Black-led giving circles. And so just kind of taking a moment to just kind of jump right into that. I mean, because you have giving circles of all structures and in all communities focus on various things. And so one of the questions that I would like to pose to the panelists is like, what is an advantage of giving through a Black-led giving circle, and why should we do it?
I think one of the things, one of the advantages of giving to a Black-led giving circle is that we have a deep love for Black people, a deep love for Black community, and we recognize our brilliance. And, you kind of alluded to this at the beginning, Miranda, like, we come to this through an asset frame. And I think that that is a framework that is missing in institutional philanthropy when it comes to supporting Black people, Black communities, and other communities of color. I'll also say that, again, no one is going to save us. So I think it's important that we start investing in ourselves. And when you invest in a Black giving circle, you're investing in Black leadership, in Black capacity building, in Black organizations. And so, in moments like this, where we see what's happening in society, like, it's just critically important that we just double down and bet on us.
Yes, I agree.
I think I'll chime in too.
I'll address that, saying, sharing something that one of our grantees shared with us. When she was receiving her award, she said, with the Southside Giving Circle, we can have a different conversation. And immediately I understood what she meant. Black women leading organizations oftentimes spend a tremendous amount of time just translating very simple things. They spend a lot of time proving themselves. They spend a lot of time just trying to almost speak a different language, speak the language of a donor who doesn't have a similar lived experience. So with a Black-led giving circle, nonprofit organization leaders, they're sort of given this space where they can get right to the work and not necessarily have to use all of that time and effort to just explain the very basics of what they're doing.
I mean, I think the other thing that is, to piggyback on what Akira said, like, on our form, we list a couple of ways that the funds could support you, but then we keep it open for people to just say, like, we had like living expenses, marketing expenses, legal expenses, things like that. And then you could say what else it was. And there was no judgment about what you needed it for or what you wanted it for, because we recognize that it's not our job to do that as much as it is just to create a space to show up for each other in a way that is necessary. So I think it's directly related to that. Like we don't, or even how you define your art, because ours is mostly about art. You know, in the arts world, there's this definition of fine art, and then there's art that's, you know, infused with social justice. And then there's, you know, and so people feel like they have to look a certain way in order to get funded or speak a certain way in order to get funded. And someone asked us in one of our Instagram posts, what type of art do you fund? We offer different categories, but then we ask you, describe who you are. Like, you know, self-description, and we can just connect with that. Like 9 times out of 10, someone in the group is familiar with whatever is being described and the need that it could service. So it's like hearing from you who you are, not trying to have a predetermined box that you need to fit into. Acceptance and empowerment. I think it's just, yeah.
Mhm.
And that experience and that acceptance, that goes for your fellow Giving Circle members as well. I mean, I think that there is no coincidence that lots of Giving Circles have members who work professionally in philanthropy and see those gaps up close and personal. And so in their personal lives, they make an effort to give in a different way. And so being able to have a philanthropy experience with other people who, where you're not worried about being tokenized or marginalized in a philanthropy space. It's just a different donor experience. I mean, I've given in other spaces as well. And the experience is, frankly, you know, it's sort of people looking at me like, why am I there, or how am I there, which is probably even worse. I don't have that when I'm with the Queen Makers. We have, I mean, and Chicago Foundation for Women has other 6 Giving Circles and councils. And so we do have an opportunity to get together, to collaborate, to share our experiences. And it's just very rich to be able to give in a group of other Black women and then share that experience with, you know, other donors who frankly could learn something from us in the way that we do things. I think that that's true for Black-led Giving Circles overall. I think institutions and other collective giving groups could stand to, you know, sort of look at Black-led Giving Circles, what we do and how we do it, and consider adopting some of those approaches for themselves.
Mhm.
Especially if their goal is to, you know, be supportive and stand with Black communities. We see a lot of those statements. I think one of the best ways is to take a look at what we're doing.
And I just think that philanthropy as a sector can also take note of that, because philanthropy is also often has these convoluted application processes. It's harder for us to be nimble and agile and shift our strategy in moments where that's necessary. You know, I hear that we're the ivory tower and we're not as accessible to people. And so, you know, when you invest in Black-led Giving Circles, some of those processes, those barriers are eliminated, right? And so what I really love about Black Giving Circles is just the fact that you can respond to community like that. In traditional philanthropy, sometimes it's just a little bit harder for us to do that because we got to do a theory of change. We got to consult with the board. And, you know, there's all this red tape and bureaucracy that often, you know, just inhibits us from being really agile in moments of need.
Yeah, I wanted to add that one of the joys I had last year was collaborating with Akira and Tracy and writing the op-ed, The Sweetness of Circles, which I'll add to the chat box. But it helped lift up the significance of Black Giving Circles and really call the question why we don't have more of them and what we can do to stir and create more of them, because I think two pieces of significance come to mind for me in particular. It's one, collective giving. I mean, that has been our story. I mean, that's how we have gotten over. Black philanthropy is about liberation and about power building, and examples from our whole 401 years in the US and even prior. And collective giving has been central to that, and examples of family and community members who pooled resources to buy their family members out of slavery, and how we created universities and how we created Black business has been all around collective giving and collective social capital. And so I think it's been significant throughout the Black experience in America, and it's as pressing now and important now as it ever has been. And so there's that piece about Black giving circles. And then also the piece that, yes, while we're changing the face of philanthropy, we also have an opportunity to change the ways of philanthropy that Sierra and Akira have already talked about. And I think there's a real opportunity there to really create change in our communities, particularly in Black communities, or specifically in Black communities. It's an inside outside game. I mean, we need people in institutional philanthropy, whether it's people like Akira or like Sierra or others of you who, Miranda and Allison, who work as consultants or either are employed by institutional philanthropy. And it's people like our giving circles and our giving circle members and other community activists who are calling the question and making sure funders are responsive to our communities and held accountable. I think the models that we're creating in our giving circles can be examples for institutional philanthropy, and they're already making spaces in this, moment of crisis and to be responsive to calls for racial justice. And we've got the template, we've got the blueprints right here and what we've been doing, and can help lead that conversation and hold them responsible and make sure this work and these change and transformation that's happened in the philanthropic space to make things safer and fairer for Black people, that we keep this conversation going. And because our work's still going to be here, even when they turn their attentions to other interests. And we've got to mobilize our resources, capitalize and secure resources from institutional philanthropy to continue doing the work we're going to be doing for probably another 400 years, but hopefully at a faster rate of progress.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect segue. So we've been talking a lot about giving circles and Black-led giving circles and what our giving circles bring to community and how people can get engaged and alignment and values and all of these things. What are some pointers or some tips that we can offer to white institutions, the philanthropy overall, because we kind of have a sense of what's not happening and what should be happening, or individuals who just want to get involved, whether it's through in-kind support or financial donations? Like, what are some conversations or tips that we can offer to institutions and or individuals to support Black-led nonprofit organizations or Black-led giving circles?
I'm curious, Tracy, do you have some thoughts on that?
Oh,
Plenty.
I will tell you that over the years, it's been a challenge, just because how we're structured. Like, as we said at the beginning of the call, some giving circles are structured differently. Some are donor advised funds, some are fiscally sponsored, some are 501c3. So because for most of our existence, we were a donor advised fund, we were unable to pay for our admin expenses. So it would have been helpful even if the community, reached out to support, do you need meeting space? Do you just need to borrow a copy to copy your brochures or, your handouts? Even those little things would have been a big help. But for the most part, we've just been like treading along. But I would say that if someone doesn't have the financial means, just reach out to the Giving Circle and ask them, how can we help? especially administratively to keep you going. I would say at a bare minimum to do that.
Yeah, thank you.
Ask them, listen. Ask them, listen.
Yes.
Oftentimes people come to our communities like they know the answer and don't even listen to what we actually have to say.
Absolutely. Do much more listening, be less paternalistic and prescriptive. There's just so much to be gained from listening to Black-led giving circles. Just engaging, I'm constantly meeting new people, new circles. Understand that when you meet or when you discover a Black-led giving circle, when you meet the members, the leaders of that group, there's a wealth of information that is coming. So if you can sort of put aside what you think philanthropy should look like or who you think philanthropists should look like, and pay attention to the way that the giving circle is giving, pay attention to who they're funding and why, that would be tremendous, because I mean, to have greater support for the grantees, and also, I mean, I'm glad that my giving circle is a part of the Chicago Foundation for Women. They've been a great host for my giving circle and the other giving circles and councils, and we pretty much, run ourselves. And I think that is incredibly important, because it's not the experience that some of the other giving circles that I've interacted with, that has not been their experience. And their experience has been their host organization, Community Foundation, has made it not easier, but more difficult for them to do their work in the community. So I would say to listen and learn how you can be a valuable partner to giving circles. And I think that probably starts with looking at Black people, sort of beyond whatever your business case is for engaging with them, and understand that Black people on their own, whether they're going to increase your donor amounts or meet some sort of benchmark that you have, that our existence, what we're doing in the community, the giving circle itself, and the people that we support have inherent value that can't always be quantified in the ways that you want to put into your spreadsheet.
Yeah, I would say also that just amplifying our work. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but oftentimes I'm bothered by the fact that the Black Giving Circle story isn't amplified as much in the broad spectrum of things as some of the other collective giving groups. And I think it's part of our responsibility as giving circles to do more to lift up and amplify our story. As we calibrate our local work and what our mission is, we do have to carve out some time to lift our own selves up, if nothing else, because I don't know if it would happen otherwise, to celebrate and lift up our story and our successes and our value in communities. And I know I have an op-ed I think may be coming out next week, and so I'll share that with you guys when it does. But from my experience as a giving circle person, I think it may run in the Chronicle, I'm not sure. And it is a response to the National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy, the report that they came out recently. So I'd also say that, and to Akira's point about the mixed bag of experiences that we have with our hosts, particularly if you are hosted by a community foundation or some other entity, that sometimes they can be too overbearing or prescribed in your work. And in my case, too hands off. It's like, 14 years. And they do little to engage with us or to really tap the brain trust that we are and resource that we are. But we have, National Foundation presidents that are part of our giving circles, and people with a whole host of knowledge and skill set. And yet it is never, ever been tapped by our community foundation, even though we've been a fund there for 14 years. And in many ways, I'm fine with it being hands off in some ways, in terms of the alternative of being too hands on. But I know we all have to navigate that. And I think if anything, institutions can be more mindful and less engaged in an open way to find out how best to be supportive and what supportive looks like for your specific circle.
That's key. I'm on my third host. That's very important.
Yes.
Yeah,
Hosts matter.
I want to have
hosting does matter.
Yes.
I want to have maybe a follow-up conversation just about that whole host thing and options and mechanisms and alternatives that exist for us, so that we don't get hamstrung and preoccupied or beleaguered with dealing with our host. And in fact, one of the questions we're even grappling with is, given some of the NCRP data, is this a time to divest intentionally and publicly from our community foundation? So anyway, it's a question, and where do we go if we do? And
right.
So
it is a long-standing issue and important enough that as a consultant, I have even started to talk with some giving circles about what can be built that doesn't yet exist to support giving circles in a way that allows them to do their work in their best way. And so you've heard with administratively, it's difficult, but I think that there's also a values piece to it as well. And I think it's really rooted in, just these ideas of who we are as donors and who we are as humans. And so please feel free to reach out to me, akira@freshphilanthropy.com. I really want to continue that conversation about Giving Circle hosts, and just to really see how we as Black-led giving circles can make an impact in that area.
And just for context, and I think Tracy, you might have said this, giving circles, some are their own 501c3, some of them are donor advised fund, some of them have fiscal sponsors or hosts, whether that may be their local community foundation, or in our case, we have a local Black-led foundation, Deaconess Foundation, where the Dr. Reverend Starsky Wilson is our fiscal sponsor for Black Funders of St. Louis. So we were able to find that alignment that's working for us. But I definitely would like to be a part of that conversation, because hosting in itself is a whole nother conversation, a part two to today's conversation. But I do recognize that we are a little bit over on time. We did start a couple minutes late. And so with that, I want to personally thank each one of our panelists for being a part of our conversation today. This is a prime example of people willing to give their time and their talent. So when you say, well, I don't know how I can show up, there's always a place where people can show up. And so I personally want to thank each one of our panelists. We have people from all over. We're talking Chicago. We're talking about our connections to Hampton. We're talking about the DC area. We're talking about New Orleans. And what you're hearing is that no one community is the same. Although we are all giving circles, Black-led, focused on Black philanthropy, we approach this work very differently. But in that same vein, there's no right or wrong. And so if you're thinking about starting a giving circle, if you have questions, I hope it's okay with the panelists and even myself, you are more than welcome to reach out with any questions. I will be very truthful with you with what my process was like. And so personally, thank you to the panelists for being a part of today's conversation. We could not do this without you. Check the chat box, because there have been some links that have been shared with some resources, from articles to upcoming conversations and things of that nature. So please check the chat box, before we leave. But in closing, thank you to the panelists. And I challenge each and every one of you to think about this. It is time. It is time. No more excuses. It is time. Find your place. and show up for your community. It is time. So no more, I don't have, I don't know. It is time. Find your place and show up for your community. We are around our emails. You can find our information. Well, actually, we'll email it out. That's what we'll do. We'll email out each other panels' email addresses so that you all can access them afterwards if you're interested in giving circles. Again, to the point that was made earlier, we need more. We need more Black-led giving circles who are working on this work. And so with that, I will stop. I will thank our panelists and I will thank all of our participants for being a part of today's conversation. This video will be made available on our website next week, so feel free to share with your personal and professional networks. Again, on behalf of Black Funders of St. Louis, as we wrap up August, which is known for Black Philanthropy Month. Thank you all. Figure out how you can get involved, find your place, and show up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.